had a long conversation with my mother last night about how happy I am that she moved out of Toronto to Vancouver. Why is this doing this?
Yeah, it's probably a good choice. Toronto's not great.
There we go. My mother, 102 years old. She has her place. It's nice. She has these amazing ladies who take care of her.
Right now it's probably minus 20.
It's just too big.
Celsius is fine.
Celsius.
Oh, jeez.
And it was like minus 30.
Okay.
Minus 25.
How's it even
So
possible
I
to
also
get that
don't have
cold?
to stare at it.
Okay.
Okay.
It's like you like
Let's
pull
go.
water and it starts freezing on the way out.
Okay, yesterday we learned first the shot in the psukim. V'vadatem esavai lokechem, v'berech eslachmu chaves mimecho. That you should serve the Eibishter and he will bless your bread and your water. V'esmispar yomecha molei, and the number of and the number. I'm sorry. V'asirosi machna mikebecho. That pasuk ends with V'asirosi machna mikebecho. And I will remove sickness from your midst. The next pasuk is Loisi mishakela v'karavatzecho. You shouldn't be or have. You won't have miscarriages, losing children, or barrenness. And then we say, and the number of your days I will fill. The Rebbe taught us on the first page that's simple pshat in bracha muflaga, exaggerated bracha in Bani Chayim Azeni. Children, health, and a livelihood. We asked the question at the end, and we asked the question to sort of dealt with the issue. Chazal say that these are the three things that are not dependent on merit, they're dependent on mazel. The Eibusher decides who gets these things for whatever reason the Eibusher decides, and it isn't necessarily based on how serious a person is in Avodas Hashem down here in Olam Hazeh. So we said that's relative to the basic needs, whereas relative to greater bracha, that is affected by avodah. How that works, don't know. That's God's issue, not ours. That's His job, not our job. Our job is to do what we're supposed to do. Whatever happens, so that's God's job. And then the Rebbe asked the question about avodah. Why is it that what we do is called avodah? V'vadatem es Hashem Elokechem, as opposed to vasisim es mitzvah, do his mitzvahs. Right? What's avodah? Now avodah comes from a relationship and a reality that we experience down here in Olam Hazeh, Adoin Eved, master servant. But the relationship that we have with the Eibishter doesn't mirror that relationship. Why not? What were we taught yesterday? Why is our relationship with the Eibishter not like the relationship of a master and a servant?
Because the master doesn't gain anything from
well said, right? That the master servant, so the master requires the Eved. Without the Eved, there's also things the master can't accomplish. The Eibishter doesn't need us. So why is that the prototype for our relationship with the Eibishter? It's not similar at all. Right? The Eibishter Shleimusa de Kula, the Rebbe quoted the Zohar. He's complete. Completely complete. He's complete. So then, why the master, even though he's an Adain Amiti, the Rebbe says he's a true master, but he needs people to go plow his fields, to reap his wheat, etc., etc. So he can be involved in other things. He can sell it. He can make the big contracts. He can do whatever he wants to do, right? But he can't do all of it. So he needs someone to help him. The Eibishter doesn't need us. So then, why is it that what we do is called vavadita? How does that work? And in that line, the Rebbe then showed that there seemed to be contradictions or difference, a certain tension in statements of Chazal and Psukim relative to the idea does our Avodah affect the Kadosh Baruch Hu? The first two we saw were that our Avodah does not affect the Kadosh Baruch Hu at all. Is he able to care if someone checks from the front of the neck and the back of the neck? The mitzvahs were given for us. Right? You want to live a life of holiness, so do mitzvahs. You don't, so don't do mitzvahs. The Eibishter is less Eibishter because you don't do mitzvahs, not you. Right? If someone doesn't do mitzvahs, of course not. The Eibishter is more Eibishter because someone does mitzvahs? No. Right? The Eibishter needs our mitzvahs? No mitzvahs. The Eibush is the Eibush. Right? Okay. So that's one Maimer Chazal, which is pretty stark, but yeah, in all fairness, it does make sense. It's not hard to understand. Right? And then, of course, the Pasuk in Iyov, Im Chatasa Ma'asula, right? If you did an Aveira, what have you done? As if you're somehow getting back at the Eibishter and you're going to show him who's boss. Well, that's just not the way it works, right? Okay, but then the Rebbe brought, the last two things we saw, the Rebbe brought two Midrashim based on Psukim that were explaining Psukim, where it does seem to be that our behavior somehow affects the Kadosh Baruch Hu. Pasuk from Bamidbar, Parsha Shlach, Va'ata Yigdal Na Koyach Adni, that it should be greater the power of Adni based on our Aveda, right? And then Sur Yoled Chateshi, that the rock, who your children weaken him. How do the children weaken him? If we don't do mitzvahs, so to speak, we weaken HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So, how's that work? Now, relative to those two Maimer Chazal, both times the Rebbe said Kaviyachol, so to speak, because that's harder to understand. The Eibush is completely transcendent of everything we do. That's not hard to understand. Whereas how we affect the Eibishter, that is hard to understand. Ach inyan hu, space. The matter is like this. Kemuva b'Chassidus, as is brought in Chassidus mi'Avedus HaKodesh, a sefer of Kabbalah, that this is brought in the Shalah, but I believe the Avedus HaKodesh was before the Arizal. Demasha Amru Razal, it's a sefer Kabbalah. Demasha Amru Chazal v'chi ma ich besloi. When Chazal say, what does the Eibishter care? Now, this is going to be Kabbalistic language, which is very different than Chassidus. The Rebbe is then going to translate it into Chassidus so we'll understand it. This is Kabbalit. Right? So basically what's the answer going to be? The answer is going to be that there's two different levels of godly reality. One completely transcendent that we don't affect, and a level of immanent godly reality that we do affect. Okay, what are those two things going to be called? They're going to be called, not going to be called one thing in Kabbalah, but the Rebbe is going to translate the Kabbalah into Chassidus, and they're going to be called, which is also, these words come from Chassidus, from Kabbalah, Ati Kanadach, the Seder, but the language we're about to see is a language you won't find in Chassidus. Right? Ati Kanadach. What are Ati Kanadach? Two different levels of Keser. What's Keser? The source of Elam Atzilus. And we'll see. We're going to understand that, so don't worry. What's called Ati Kemin and Arachanpin, generally just called Ati Kanadach. What are they? We'll see. So, in other words, there's a level of Elokus that's not affected by us, and that's going to be a more transcendent level. And there's a level of Elokus that is affected by us. What does he care? That Maimer Chazal, that's relevant to the following level of godliness. Hu al Adon Yochid, the one master, Sharash Sharashim, the source of sources, meaning there's a source, and then that source itself has a higher source. Delay that to that level of Elokus, lo yichpes klal. Our mitzvahs don't touch that level of Elokus. Vamnam, however, letzorech hakoved, for the need of the honor, lahashpia, to affect, right? Lashpia is to affect, give bounty, al haroshim elyonim, on the supernal heads, whatever that is, liyached roisha machshava b'seifa, to unite the beginning of thought with its end, relative to that level of godly reality, whatever that is, tzorech gamorhu. Our mitzvahs are very important. Okay. So in other words, the level of completely transcendent godly reality that is what it is, has nothing to do with the world, isn't connected to the world, and isn't affected by anything that goes on in the world. And then there's going to be a level of godly reality that evidently is more affected, more connected to the world, because after all, it's all about being mashpia to the Roshim Elyonim. It's all about giving something to other levels of godliness that will produce, ultimately result in the creation of worlds or this world. And what are those Roshim Elyonim? well, they happen to be Chochmah and Bina, Atzilus, supernal heads, intellect, Chochmah and Bina. So there's a level that is the source of the or that's nimshach, that's drawn down into Chochmah and Bina of Atzilus. And what's that going to be called? Arich. The level of Kesser that's responsible for being the source of the light that's drawn into Olam Atzilus. To put it in words that we might understand a little better, hopefully we do. If we don't, I don't know where we've been. The level of Sevev that is the source of Mamad. Right? There's a level of our Sevev that ultimately is, so to speak, the last stop. Now, obviously, we can't talk about this in such limited terms, but okay, we will, just in order to have some understanding. The last stop in Sevev, that place in Sevev, that place in infinite light that's beyond being clothed in Kalim, that is the source of the first level of light that is clothed in Kalim. And what's that level of light called? Chochmah Datzilus. What's Chochmah Datzilus? The beginning of Seder Ishtalshlus, the beginning of the four worlds that we learned about in Basi Lagani, that hopefully you've written all sorts of interesting information about, because the second question asked was, what's the difference between Amala and Sevev? And if I don't know that, I didn't learn Basi Lagani, right? Because that's what Basi Lagani teaches me. If I don't know it, so I didn't learn Basi Lagani. Okay, I'll learn it some other year. Right? So I might have sat there while it was being learned, but I didn't learn it. I wasn't mean to learn something. It means I know it. Learning how to drive. What does that mean? You're sitting driving lessons, but you don't know how to drive? No, it means you sat in driving lessons and you do know how to drive. And if you didn't know how to drive, what didn't you do? You didn't learn how to drive, right? You didn't do that. Did all sorts of other good stuff, but you didn't learn how to drive. Learn a mimer chassidus. If I don't know what's in that mimer, I didn't learn the mimer. Right? That doesn't mean I didn't read the mimer, didn't do something very useful when I was learning that mimer, and wasn't mekayim the mitzvah of Talmud Torah. But ultimately, if I don't understand the information when I finish the mimer, so then, right? If you read a book and you can't tell anybody one name of any character or what the story is, so you didn't really do much reading the book, right? I mean, I just finished a great novel. What happened? I don't remember. Well, who was it written by? I don't know. Well, what was the basic setting? I don't know. Maybe 18th century? I don't remember. I'm not sure. I guess I should read the book again. Or not. If it's a novel, you don't have to read it again.
Rabbi, what was a chafet?
What?
In the beginning of the...
Ichpas. That was the
care.
Care. That was the medrash we quoted yesterday. Was the Abish to care if you shecht from the front of the neck or the back of the neck? Now that's pretty bizarre, because he's the one that told us to shecht from the front of the neck, right? What does that mean? Oh, so what does the Vedas HaKadosh say? That means that our proper shechting of a cow doesn't affect a certain level of godly reality. It does affect reality. It has effect in godly reality. What level of godliness? I was going to explain it at length in the paragraph. The level of godliness that's responsible for all the bounty and godly energy that descends down into this world through all the worlds. Right? You and I can bring about a state of health. That's what I was going to explain here. You and I can bring about a state of health in Seder Ishtalshlus by virtue of our mitzvahs. What's that? Arich and down. Right? Olam Atzilus. What do we learn in Chassidus? Here we are learning about how we don't affect something Beseder, but we do affect something, and it's really quite astounding. And hopefully, after learning the first parak in Basi Lagani, you appreciate Olam Atzilus as a pretty lofty level of godly reality. Okay, that being said, what happens when you and I do a mitzvah? We're meisif ar in Olam Atzilus. We increase the light in Olam Atzilus. Wow. Okay, what's the source of that light? Okay, well, that light, obviously, Olam Atzilus has a source. Everything has a source in something except one thing called Atzmus. We learned that in the Rebbe's Basi Lagani, right? That's why all those upper worlds are not the ultimate purpose of creation. If they were the purpose of creation, they're an expression of a yerida, of a descent from a higher level to a lower level. That's what you see when you're in those worlds. Any world of revelation, what do you see? That this world isn't really what's here. What's here is a higher level of godliness. It's the source of this level that I'm experiencing. Okay, so that's yerida. Where do you not experience that yerida? Down here in Olam Hazeh. Why? Well, because in Olam Hazeh you experience existence by virtue of itself. What's that? Atzmus. Right? The only thing that has no source in anything. Now you and I think we experience that we don't have a source, that we know that experience is false. Okay, so therefore, what is our source in Elokus? Smusi is Baruch. That's the Rebbe explained to us in Ois Dalit, and that's what we saw together, and I think that's question 7. Someone sent me a question. Someone who's not in the class, but who used to be, sent me a question. He said he must have picked up the sheet from somewhere. Oh, Taki, he's probably on one of the WhatsApp groups. So he sent me so in question 7, could you say like, so we had voice notes back and forth about that. Right, okay. So every state of reality has a source in a higher state of reality. So Atzilus has a source in a higher state of reality. What is that? That's called Arich.
Gotta raise him.
Why raise him? Well, here, we're going to see about Atik, and now we're talking about Arich. Okay, now, I spelled out Anpin, and it's spelled Atik Yomin, but you'll run into it in the Chassidus as Atik and Arich. And what are those two? Those are 2 levels in Keser of Atzilus. And this is going to be called Panemius of Keser, and this is going to be called, in our mind, the Rebbe will not use the word Kisonius of Keser, but it is called the Kisonius of Keser, the external expression of Keser in other places. Here the Rebbe is going to be, it's so interesting, the Rebbe is very much not to use, it seems, because he uses longer words not to say that, the lower level of Keser. And we'll explain that, okay? But that's just technically, those are the 2 levels we're talking about here. All right, so what level does our avoida affect? Arich. Because you and I are meisif in Eilam Atzilus every time we increase godly light in Eilam Atzilus every time we do a mitzvah. As we're sitting here right now doing this mitzvah called Talmud Torah, we are increasing the light in Eilam Atzilus, which is pretty amazing. Where does that light come from? It comes from a place called Arich. It also, that the light in Arich comes from a place called Atik, so domino effect, don't we also affect Atik? The Rebbe will deal with that. Don't worry about that. All right? We affect Arich. So to speak, you're pushing the button of Arich, which is allowing light to emanate downward into Eilam Atzilus. And ultimately into all the worlds. Down here.
By doing mitzvahs.
By doing mitzvahs. By serving God. So that's the Avedis HaKedesh's answer. Those Maimar Chazal that say we don't affect, that's talking about a transcendent level of godliness, which we're going to call Atik in a minute. And those psukim and those medrashim that talk about the fact that we do affect the Eibishter, that's talking about Arich. That's the level of godliness we affect. Because that's connected to the world to the extent that it's the source of Eilam Atzilus. It's the source of the first of the 4 worlds that we learned about in Basi Lagani. That's why this is a mimer that's reasonable to learn as soon as you finish Basi Lagani. So then this mimer should make sense, because I just did Seder Ishtalshlus. I understand Seder Ishtalshlus well, and I understand Mamala and Sovev. So now we're talking about 2 different levels in Sovev. Which should make sense. Okay, now the Rebbe is going to start explaining this. All right, so that's the rather terse and technical statement of the Avedis HaKodesh. His name was Pano. All right. Now, already we get a certain idea. He says there, Adon Yochid Shoresh HaShorashim. Oh, so what's the source of all the light that comes into Seder Ishtalshlus? Arich. What's the source of the source? Atik. Right? Okay, that's what he said. Then Yachid Shoresh HaShorashim, the source of the source. The word source, I assume, comes from the word Shoresh. Right? Same word. Hainu, this is the Rebbe talking. Hainu, the bebechinas adon yochid shoresh kol shorashim, on that level of whatever that is, this one master that is the source of sources, which we know is Atik. Ein inyan aveda nagea klal. Our aveda doesn't affect that at all. Ki'im, except what do we affect? Bislav shusay b'seder ishtalshlus. When light is clothed in Seder Ishtalshlus means four worlds. Tzilas, Bria, Tzira, Asiya. What's unique about those four worlds? What kind of light exists in those four worlds that, so to speak, doesn't exist anywhere else? What's that light called? You learned about it.
Or Savior.
Absolutely. Well, it's true. Our Savior is found there, but our Savior is also found above there. There's a level of light that is found, so to speak, only there. It's called Or Mamale, right? Isn't that what we learned? Or Mamale? Or Mamale is the light that's different in all the worlds and powers all the worlds individually and uniquely. That's what Or Mamale is, the light that fills the Kalim. Where does that start? Elam Atzilus. First parak in Basel. Spent a long time in that first parak. Okay. Mamale, or Mamale. What's our Mamale? Light that fills Kalim. Where all of a sudden, again, this is general. You will run into instances in Chassidus where it will talk about Kalim on higher levels, etc., etc. But simply, first things first, understand things on the most simple and basic level. Where does the whole notion of Kalim begin, so to speak? Chochmah Datzilus, first level of reality where you can talk about godly light being clothed in a particular vessel. What's that vessel? Chochmah, the sphere of Chochmah, or Mamale, a light filling a vessel. And that light is distinct. It's different than light in Elam Abriya, which is distinct from light in Elam HaYetzirah, which is distinct from light in Elam HaYetzirah. Sevev is a level of light that's equal in all the worlds. Mamale is a level of light that's different in every world. Two major differences between Sevev and Mamale, that's two of them, right? Sevev is equal in all the worlds, Mamale is not. Sevev is too powerful to be clothed in Kalim, and Mamale is clothed in Kalim. Those are two of the differences between Mamale and Sevev, which I think is question 2. Right? But that's what we learn. Right? Okay. So now we're talking about two different levels of Sevev, which are the source of the four worlds. Now, one is the direct source of the four worlds. The other is called the source of the source. And that level of reality, evidently the source of the source, which the Rebbe hasn't called Atik yet, but I'm telling you it's Atik, don't worry, he's going to tell us. That level called Atik is transcendent of the worlds and not affected by what goes on in the worlds. Whereas Arich is, since it's the source of the light that ultimately emanates down into the worlds, so whatever happens in the worlds affects Arich to the extent that when you and I do a mitzvah, we add light to Elam Atzilus. Well, what's the source of light in Elam Atzilus? That's called Arich. So I'm pushing the button of Arich, so to speak, so light will emanate from Arich, like open up the chute, and light will emanate down into Atzilus. You want to see it in graphic, physical terms, which help us, because we're physical beings. Okay, that's Atik, that's Arich. So that's what the Rabbi says. Again, start at the top. Hainu, the Bechinas Adon Yochid Shadish Kol Shadishim, on that level of reality, which is Atik, Ein Inyan Aveda Nager Klal. Our Aveda doesn't affect it, that level at all. That's the level that says, what Ma'achbis like? What does Atik care whether you shech this way or that way? Atik is completely transcendent of that level of reality. But there's a level of godliness that's all about that level of reality. Interestingly enough, if we talk about different levels in Kesser, how would you define Arich Ratzon? The will of the Eibishter. Well, that's pretty powerfully revealed down here in Elam Hazeh. Right? Source of everything that goes on. Of all the worlds. So what is affected? Ki'im, rather, what is affected? Bihislav shusei b'seder ishtalshlus. When that level of godly light emanates downward and is ultimately clothed in the kalim of Seder Ishtalshlus, which begins where? Chochmah Datzilus. The beginning of Seder Ishtalshlus is a place called Chochmah of Atzilus. Hachel, another Rebbe says, Hachel mi bechinas hachochma, that level of hislavshus, of or mamale, of light being clothed in vessels. Where does that start? Chochma. Chochma where? Chochma datzilus. Shehi reishis hishtalshlus. It's the beginning of hishtalshlus. Hishtalshlus means the orderly downward emanation of godly light, and you and I also know that means four worlds: Atzilus, Bria, Yetzirah, Asiya. The four worlds, that's called Seder Ishtalshlus. And if we say L'mayla mi Seder Ishtalshlus, beyond Seder Ishtalshlus, we mean beyond Elam Atzilus. That's what we mean. Right? Again, anything you say in Chassidus means that's what we mean generally. Might you run into information that contradicts that? Yes, because it's talking from a different point of view and talking about higher levels of reality. But first things first. Right? 4 worlds, Seder Ishtalshlus. Atzilus, Bri, Yitzir, Asiyah. That's Seder Ishtalshlus. The Chochma hi Reishis. Reishis Chochma. Yes, Hashem. Chochma is Reishis. Chochma is the beginning. Be Reishis. Bara Elokim. What does Uncle say? B'chochmasa. What's Reishis? Chochma. Right? B'chochmasa. Bara Elokim. Reishis. Yeah, we're okay. Part of this is review, part of this is new. That's the way to learn things. Right? So when you and I do a mitzvah, what do we affect? 4 worlds. Because we said, the Rebbe isn't saying it here, but it happens to be, it's brought in Chassidus all over, that when you and I do a mitzvah, we're meisif or in Eilam Atzilus. So that's Chochma de Atzilus. We're meisif or, we increase light in Atzilus. We make Atzilus, imagine, so to speak, we make Atzilus an even more godly place than it is, by you and I down here fiddling around in our little puddles of Gashmias, right? In our state of absolute, complete, and total limitation. We're able to affect unbelievably lofty levels of godly reality. Wow, it's pretty astounding. Now here we're talking about we don't affect also. Okay, say that we don't affect. So you can get all upset about what you don't affect, or you can get rather blown away by what you do affect. And not only do you affect Eilam Atzilus, but you also affect, that's what I was going to say in the next line, the Gam, also L'mayla Mizeh. You also affect one level beyond that, the Bechinas HaKeser. You also affect Keser, which is transcendent. Sevev. Not Mamale. Hine, what level of Keser? The Bechina Tachtena Shaba, the lower level of Keser, often again called the external expression, which we'll talk about in a second. Bechinas Arich. Oh, Baruch Hashem. We saw the word we're waiting for. The level called Arich. Because that's what you'll write when you run into Chassidus, you learn Chassidus and you learn about Arich, you're talking about this level of reality. The level of Keser that's the source of light for Eilam Atzilus. Meaning, that place in Sevev that is the source of Or Mamale. Right? In you, what's that? What's the part of superconscious you that is constantly being revealed in conscious you? Your will. Right? You're constantly becoming aware of what you want. Oh. And it's powering everything you do, right? But it's not conscious. It's superconscious or subconscious, but we'll talk about it in positive. Right? Superconscious. Okay, so that superconscious will is constantly being revealed in your conscious reality and powering everything that we do. We talked about it in terms of understanding the expression of Mamala and Sevev in powers of the soul. Question 2a, maybe, I don't know, 2b, 2a, I don't know, whatever it says there. Right? True? How is this expressed in powers of the soul? Okay, Ratzon and Tainug are what? 2 musholim, 2 aspects of what you and I would call Keches Makifin in our soul. All surrounding powers, right? They're not clothed in any goof. They're Sevev. They're like Sevev. A mushal for Sevev and godliness. And then what's the mushal for Mamala and godliness? Different levels. Sight is higher than speech, which is higher than movement, all of which are lower than intellect, right? Okay. Higher levels, lower levels. More sophisticated light, clothed in more sophisticated kelim. The eye is an incredibly sophisticated kli, more sophisticated than a hand. Right? Doesn't mean hands aren't sophisticated. They're incredibly sophisticated, but they're not as sophisticated as an eye. Right? Okay. And the most sophisticated of all is obviously the brain. And it's the most protected. The eye's fairly well protected. Hands, not protected at all, unless you buy gloves. Okay. So that's all Mamale, higher levels, lower levels. What's the source of that? Soivev. Specifically, Keser. What level of Keser? Called Arich. Shehi Shoresh HaNe'et Solim. It is the source of what's Ne'et Solim? What's the root of that word? Atzilus. Right? It's the source of emanated reality. That level, Noigeya Inyan Aveda, that level is affected. One more line before we get to the Biur Inyan, the explanation. Mashein Kain, that's not the case, Bebechinas Atik. Yay. Panemius Keser. What? We said Atik.
He said it.
He said it.
He said the thing.
Right? Atik. Arich and Atik. Okay? If you don't remember that, Chaval, your life will be different. You do remember it? Amazing. Your life will be different. Right? Because if you remember ideas about God, then your life is different because you can actually think about God. If you can't think about God, the only thing you can think about is, other stuff that you understand. So what might I understand? I might understand hockey. I might understand coffee. I might understand politics. There's all sorts of things I could understand. And so those are the things I'll think about. Right? Why are we so obsessed with students who pass through these doors that they should leave here knowing how to learn a page of Gemara? Because if they do, they'll open up the book the rest of their life. If they don't, they'll never look at it again. Why? Who wants to open up something I don't understand? You ever read French novels? It's boring. Right? It's pretty boring reading French novels. And even if you have rudimentary French, why am I going to read a novel in French? I'll read it in English. I can enjoy it. I know what it means. Right? Why would I do something that's unenjoyable? I don't like feeling stupid. I don't know half the words in the French novel, so I feel like an idiot. Like, why don't I know this? I mean, this guy's, whoever wrote the novel, he's such a bright guy. No, he just, instead of saying, I am, he said, je suis when he was 2 years old, right? Okay, fine. So I feel like a dummy. So if I don't know how to learn a page of Gemara, I'll never open it up because I don't want to do something I'm not good at. Okay, if I can't understand a Maimer Chassidus, you know what? I'm not going to open it up. Why? I don't like doing things I'm not good at. What am I going to look at? I'll look on the net and I'll read the news. That's what I'm going to do in my spare time, right? But if I'm good at something, I'll enjoy doing that, right? Playing tennis the first time probably isn't that enjoyable. You're just picking up balls the whole time, right? You hit one and you go and pick them all up, and then you hit two and then you go pick them all up. Once you get good at it, it's incredibly enjoyable and incredible exercise. It's just a lot of fun. It is just a lot of fun, right? Okay, great exercise. And the exercise doing something unbelievably enjoyable. So, why not? That's such a great thing. Okay, but the first time you do it, not very much fun. It's interesting because you've never done it before. But if you stayed like that 5 years later, you're not going to go play tennis, right? Oh, let's go pick up some balls on the court. Oh, that's fun. Just go be a ball boy for some guys who know how to play, and you'll be doing the same thing. Right? Generally, we do things that we feel a certain amount of confidence in our ability to do it. Okay. So that's why it's so important to learn how to learn Torah, because then I'm going to do it the rest of my life. Mm-hmm. So if I understand things about Atik and Arich, I'll think about Atik and Arich the rest of my life. Right? That's pretty cool. Now, Atik and Arich, what's that really all about? Okay, Pneumius, and we're going to use the word Chitzonius. The Rabbi doesn't hear, but it is used. I'm not being blasphemous. It's just hard. The Chitzonius means external reality. So to say that about Keser is a funny thing. Okay, but it's all relative. Basically, what's the difference between Panemius and Chitzonius? There are different ways you can explain it. But one of the most simple and basic explanations of the difference, what you and I call Panemius, inner reality, and what you and I call Chitzonius, external reality, is the difference between being and function. Panemius is being, what the thing is. What it is. Not what it does, what it is. Which is a state of reality that the Western world doesn't believe in. Right? So that's why people sometimes have a hard time wrapping their head around being. Right? Because the Western world's completely and totally in a state of slavery to function. Right? That's why they have no compunction whatsoever of offing a 6-week-old fetus. It's like taking out the garbage. Why? There's no function. Does that being? It has as much being as the doctor that killed him. Right. That baby has being. Function? None. Okay, so then if all you care about is function, just chitzonius, external reality, so then what's the problem? Also old people, right? I heard the statistic 3%. This came up on Shabbos. My wife said it's the 6th most common source of, source, I guess is the right word, of death in the enlightened country called Canada. What is the 6th most common cause of death? Medically assisted death. Doctors killing people. 3% of the population, 3% of deaths in Canada are medically assisted. Doctors killing people who, if the doctors didn't kill them, they'd be alive the next day. Famous story, right? This is a true story. And you see how far it can get if all you believe in is chitzonius, function, and you don't believe in panemius, which is being. This is a true story in Canada. A woman who was a veteran from the army and was injured as a soldier and was in a wheelchair and was asking for the government to help her pay for ramps into her house, right? That she could get her wheelchair up and down into her house. So a social worker came to talk to her after she was going through, and the social worker said to her, this is a true story. The social worker said to her, have you ever considered just dying instead? Suicide, meaning we'll arrange for your death in a painless way, and so you won't have to go through all of this difficulty. That was the option that the social worker set forth. This is real life in a real country called Canada. Which is about as sick as it gets. Same thing in the Netherlands, getting there in England, offing old people, right? What do England and Canada have in common? So they're very interested in offing old people. Socialized medicine. Why does that mean you want to off old people? Costs money. Who? Us. Right? It's not some insurance company. It's us. It's our taxes, right? So the government is interested in saving money. Okay, so then let's just off all these old people because they're just going to cost a fortune for the next 5 years trying to keep them alive, right? They're not producing anything. That's the and that you say extreme and you think this is Orwellian. Well, it is Orwellian, but it happens to be what's going on in the world. Why? Because if you lose sight of panemius, this is where you end up. Right? If you're godless, and Canada is basically godless. The United States is not godless. The United States is still a God-fearing country. Most people in America believe in God and live their life in accordance with that, in however they understand that. Right? In the extremes, obviously in LA and Chicago and New York and Miami, a lot of people don't. Washington, right? But interestingly enough, Miami, but there's probably I'll take Miami out of there because also all the Hispanics in Miami, they all believe in God, right? But New York, LA, the people who make all the noise in America, so they're godless, right? But the people who live in America, they're called red. All those states, they all believe in God. And you can't be president of the United States if you don't pay some heed to that. Like even Joe Biden had to, pretend he's a Catholic. Right? No, seriously, right? Bill Clinton had to go to church, right? Bill Clinton, I mean, who could be more godless than Bill? I guess Hillary, but who could be more godless than Bill Clinton, right? No, seriously, he's completely external, very smart, very interesting. Wasn't a bad president, but a very chitzoniistic person. I mean, my gosh, there's no panemius there at all. Okay, she's worse. Okay. But he had to pretend. He goes to church. Okay, so America, go look about to America. They haven't gotten to these places yet, right? Yet. They keep voting in the type of people they want, that some people want them to vote in. They'll get there. But Canada's ahead of America in absolute lunacy. Right? Yay, Canada. Right? I think they need a new governor. That's what I think.
Governor or Prime Minister?
I'm sorry. I meant Prime Minister. All right. So, so why am I talking about this? Because it really is Chitzonius and Panemius.
Yeah, you're right.
Right? Panemius is the being of something. So what is the being of Keser? What is Keser? Transcendent reality. That's Atik. What does Keser do? What's the function of Keser? Oh, it's the source of the light that emanates into the Matzilus. That's what Keser does. But what is it? Oh, it's a completely transcendent level of reality. And that's what the word Atik means. Ne'etak, uprooted, separate, transcendent. Right? It's also a beautiful explanation of Atik. Generally, you'll find it here. The Rebbe is going to talk about it being uprooted. Right? But there's also the idea of an otek is a copy. Right? You make an otek of something, it's called a copy of something. Right? So what's Atik? It's a copy of the image. It's a copy of Atzmus. It's a copy of the image. It's like a mirror image of Elokus. It's like the image in a mirror. It's not my machine.
Compressed file.
What?
Compressed file.
What? Compressed file.
File.
Otek. Oh, okay. But it's what's a mirror? So a mirror, you see what the thing is, but it's not it. But you see it. And it has all the qualities of that thing that it's mirroring. But it's not him, it's the mirror image of him. Right? So I don't mean mirror image backwards, which it also is, right? But I mean mirror meaning you see what's there. It's all there. Any aspect of the person will be reflected in the mirror, but it's not the person. So that's the highest levels of godly light. On one hand, they are, this is this year's Basi Lagani, they are a mirror image of the ma'or, of the luminary, and that's Atzmus. But they're only a ha'ara. They're only an illumination of it. It's not it itself. Okay. So that's Atik. Very, 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 very lofty level of godly reality. And that level, at this point, we're saying, is not affected by our Veda. Too transcendent. What's affected? So in other words, what do you and I affect? Seder Ishtalshlus. You and I are responsible for the basic health of Seder Ishtalshlus, that godly light should emanate down into Seder Ishtalshlus and surge through all four worlds, so they're all in a state of tremendous health and revelation, and they're revealing what they're supposed to reveal, and that would ultimately emanate all the way down into this world, and this world would be a place of godly revelation. And with chas v'shalom, we don't do that, so we stop up the pipes. And the light can't emanate down because the pipe is all stuffed up. Right? We fill it up with schmutz. So it gets stuffed up, and we know what happens when pipes get stuffed up, what ends up all over the place.
And where is Atik relative to that?
Atik is the beyond all that. Atik is the source of the source, right? That's what we said.
Yeah.
Now, the Rebbe hasn't made that diuk yet, but I mean, we said it was the source of the source. And that level is completely transcendent. You might ask, and I was going to ask at the end of the paragraph, end of the page, well, wait a minute, hold on, it's the source of the source, so shouldn't there be a domino effect upwards, that if Arich is emanating light into Tzilus, so shouldn't that mean that, so to speak, more light is coming from Atik into Arich, so that we're affecting that? We'll see what the Rebbe says about that. Okay. Okay. Ubirin, the explanation of all this. Now, we're not going to get through the whole beer today. Right? Shebeseder Ishtalshlus. In Seder Ishtalshlus, now the Rebbe is going to talk about when you and I do a Veda, what are we affecting? What are we doing in spiritual terms? So Beseder Ishtalshlus, in the order of the orderly downward emanation of godly light through the four worlds. That's called Seder Ishtalshlus. The word shalshelet is a chain. the chain-like downward emanation of godliness through all four worlds, right? Negeya inyan Aveda, it affects the matter of Aveda. In other words, our Aveda affects all of Seder Ishtashlos. Hein ba'kelim, both the vessels of Seder Ishtashlos, v'hein ba'others, also the light of Seder Ishtashlos. Wow, okay. And what do we know about Seder Ishtashlos? Well, that's the place where you talk about light and vessels, or mamale, or and kelim. That's Seder Ishtashlos. Do you talk about kelim above Seder Ishtashlos? No.
What do we call kelim in those words, in the upper words?
Not interested. I'm interested in knowing what Seder Ishtashlos is about right now, because I'm asking questions and people are looking at me with, what I'm talking about. So I'm not going anywhere else. We are staying in Seder Ishtashlos, and that's it, right? Until we know that so well that I can, in my sleep, I dream about it. Okay, then you want to talk about higher levels? Fine. Shebeseder Ishtashlos nageya inyan Aveda, hein ba'kelim v'hein ba'others. Right? Because again, where do kelim come into existence? Seder Ishtashlos. Where's that? What's the first place where we'll talk about Or Mamale? Chochmah v'tzilus. What does Or Mamale mean? Light that fills. What's it filling? A vessel. What's the difference between Seviv and Mamale? Well, we said it earlier, we'll say it again. Two basic differences. Well, we can say three. A Seviv is infinite, is light that's expressed in infinity. Mamale is light, that the light is still infinite, but the light's expressed in finitude. Right? Why? Well, a Seviv is too powerful to be clothed in kelim. Mamale is clothed in kelim. Right? And what other difference is there between the two? Seviv is equal in all the worlds. Mamale is different in all the worlds. Those are the three differences between Mamale and Seviv. Right? I asked you for two. Right? That's the difference between Mamale and Seviv. So where do Kelim start? Chochmah Datzilus. The light of Chochmah is clothed in this kli called the sphere of Chochmah. Dehine, inyan a kelim. Now first of all, I was going to talk about what a kli is, but obviously you and I are affecting kelim. Why? Well, that's what we're dealing with. If you and I use this thing for something positive, so we affect it, obviously, right? If we use it for something that's not, so then we affect it that way also. So you and I are busy dealing with kelim all day long. Okay, so it does make sense that we affect those kelim. So you can, and that's what we learned in Basilagani, you can elevate physical reality, take darkness and turn it into light, use physical reality for spiritual purposes, godly purposes. That's okay, we know that. That's Basilagani. Right. Now, what are kelim all about? Inyan a kelim, shuhu helim ma'or. Whoa. Kelim conceal the light. So now, whenever you and I have been talking about kelim, we've been talking about kelim revealing light, right? Amnon's magical book that reveals all of the different aspects of the light that is reflecting off it. It reveals the red in the light, and the yellow in the light, and the blue in the light. Okay, so that's true. Okay, but simultaneously, what's it doing?
Concerning all the other.
It's concealing the infinite in the light. It's revealing the possibility of this light to express itself in finite. But it's concealing the true nature of the light, which is infinite. Right? Okay, you're fair. So that's why we'll say kelim on one hand hide light. Yes, they hide the panemius of the light. What light is. And if you were to talk about what light is, what would you say? One word. Use one word to define light.
Infinite.
Infinite. B'diuk. That's the word we'd use to define godly light. Right? Infinite. Right? God's not infinite. God's light is infinite. God's beyond infinite. We've talked about that constantly. The expression of God in infinity is what you and I call light. It's not light, right? We call it light. That's the mashal we use. Infinite godly energy. Okay. Infinite godly being. Whatever. Okay. So kelim, on one hand, hide light. So therefore, what do Kalim allow for? Hu nesinis makim, it's the pretext, the giving of space, limitzias dezulas, to the existence of the other. What do Kalim allow for? Two. Or a zillion, right? I mean, once you have two, so then you've got billions and zillions. Okay? Because what does this kli do? Well, here, what does this kli do? Sorry. What does this kli do? Oh, very clearly giving room to the zulat. The red is allowing for the yellow to exist, which is allowing for the green to exist, which is allowing for the blue to exist. The other. What is it that's allowing this light to be expressed as four, okay, five, but let's start from here down. Four different expressions of light? The kli. Out here, the light's colorless. So therefore, it has infinite ability to express itself out here. As soon as it hits this kli, it becomes limited. Now, it reveals something, but it also hides a lot. Right? You might think that these are the only colors that light can express. This is the only thing you ever experienced in your life. But we know there's more because we've been outside. Right? So what do Kalim do? Nesinas makim lemetzias dezulas. Those are four words that might be good words to remember because that's the Rebbe explaining the nature of a kli. That which gives pretext to the existence of the other. In other words, that one thing can experience the existence of something else that isn't it. Oh, that's Kalim. Right? If all we had in this room was amorphous godly reality, so then we wouldn't experience any differentiation. We just experience a state of absolute oneness. What allows for us to experience all the differentiation that we experience? Kalim. Right? Ki. Now the Rebbe's going to explain. Ki kasher or meir, when the light shines, it mitzad itself, as ayeshna raka makar. What are you aware of when light is shining? The source of the light. Vein shum mitzias dezulas, and there's no existence of the other, right? Which you might have experienced sometimes if you've ever gone outside and you've whited out because the sun was so bright. Temporarily, what are you not aware of?
The source.
All you're aware of is the source, right? You're not aware of any differentiated meaning in terms of your sight. What are you aware of? Sunlight, like wow, whoa. Can't see anything. You white out. Slowly but surely, what happens? Simsum kipshuta, your pupil is working overtime to be mitzamsem the light, so that you can now see differentiated reality, which over time you will. It'll take a while. If you've been in the ophthalmologist and they put those drops in your eyes that dilate your pupils, right? And your pupil's going to stay dilated for a while, what do they always tell you? Don't drive here. Why not? Well, you're not going to be able to drive home. You're not going to be able to see because your pupil's not going to be mitzamsem the or so that you can see differentiated reality. The lesson of metaphysics is all happening in there when eyes are opening and closing to allow more light, less light. It's amazing, right? Okay, so that's what they'll tell you. Don't bring your car. You can't drive home. You don't see clearly either. But also, especially here in Yerushalayim, with these white buildings and the bright sun, you can't see a thing. They also tell you to bring sunglasses. If you forget, I once fell down. It was at only 4 steps, and there was those wide steps that are often at the outside of a building. Right? But I fell down a flight of steps, so it's coming out of the ophthalmologist. And I was looking down because I knew I forgot sunglasses, and it was a 10, 15-minute walk to my house, so I was just going to walk home. But I when I went outside, I was just white. Just missed the stairs. So I was at the bottom, I stumbled down. Whoa. Just, so walked home like this because I forgot to bring sunglasses. Okay, we've all experienced that. What's that? Well, when you experience the light, you don't experience the kalim. You don't experience differentiated reality. All you're aware of is the source. That light, just it. Wow. Turn on the light in the bathroom when you wake up in the winter and it's dark out. And you turn on the light in the bathroom. What do you see? Nothing for a minute. You just close your eyes. It's so bright. It hurts. It hurts. You just whoa. Slowly but surely, you open your eyes and you let them get used to the light, and then you have no problem. Okay, let's read one more line and we'll stop. Ki kasher or meir az yeshnei raka makor. There's only the source. But ein shum matzias tezulas, and there's no existence of the other. Aval kelim shehem helim or. What do the kalim allow for? They conceal the light. What aspect of the light are they concealing? The infinite light, the panemius of the light. What light is? They're allowing it to express itself in a form that's really contrary to what it is. They're allowing it to express itself in a form that you and I call finite. Heim neisni mokim. They give pretext, place. Lumetzias tezulas. There's a period in the next line. Va'ad, to such an extent, shebaribu yishtalshlus, through all the multitudinous downward emanations of this light, what ultimately happens? Nishave mehem, what comes into being from this light, and kelim, bechinas nivroim, created reality. Some of these mamash not the Eibishter. It only exists by virtue of the godly energy giving it existence, but it's not God. Don't bow down to it. Not him. You and me. We're not him. My neshama is. My goof isn't. My goof it's incredibly holy. It's unbelievable. It's incredible. As a matter of fact, down there in the goof, that's where everything's happening. That's what we saw in the Rebbe's first mimer when we learned those Dalit. Okay. That being said, it's not the Eibishter. Don't get carried away. Start worshiping it, which a lot of people did. Right? Getting nervous yesterday when people started talking about nature in a little too serious a way. I was starting to get nervous, but okay, no one went too far. It's close. It's pretty close.
I like when they said that Gan Eden is back. Gan Eden is back. The Iker Shekhinah is back.
I enjoyed the vegan propaganda.
Yeah.